So, have you ever thought about measuring the level of trust in your home? What if you could measure the level of trust between you and your partner, or your parents, or your siblings? Has any one of them ever asked you how much you trust them? What did you say? Yes? No? Completely? You see, we trust people at different levels, but we just can't put the right words to it. And we know that trust is made up of different factors, such as communication, integrity, fairness, finances. Now, what if we could apply this concept on a grander scale? Say one of economic proportions. And that's exactly what we did. We measured the level of trust in the business environment in Tanzania. And this project was backed by the European Union, TRIAS, and the Tanzania Chamber of Commerce, Industry, and Agriculture. And our objective was to capacitate private sector organizations so that they can engage in evidence-based dialogue with the government to improve the business environment. So we measure trust in three main areas, and I'm going to take you through them. But at the same time, we're going to compare how they relate with our household, a typical African household. So in the first area, we measured how much the government trusts in itself to deliver services to the business environment. Now, in a household, we can equate this to being the parents, because they set the rules and the regulations in the family. And we interviewed more than 1,000 public servants from 16 different government institutions which regulate the business environment. And in the second area, we approached business professionals. So these are lawyers, accountants, engineers who work with these institutions so that they can rate the services which are provided by the Tanzanian government. And we approached 1,400 business professionals. Now, in the household, we can equate this to being service providers. And then in the final area, we approached more than 3,300 small and medium-scale enterprises. And in the family setting, we can equate this to being the children or workers. So we're going to use the example of agriculture because that's what more than 70% of Tanzanians do. Now, you might be thinking, why should we measure trust? I mean, why is it important? But think about it. When a trader pays for a product, let's say for crops from a farmer, they give their money expecting crops in return. And when a farmer sells their crops, they give their crops expecting and trusting that they'll receive money for it. And sometimes even they send their crops and they receive their money much, much later, meaning that they have greater trust. Now, think of high-stakes situations where you pay your money and you need that product right there. You're like, no, I'm not going to give it to you until I see the money. A drug deal. But isn't it similar to when we buy products from a supermarket? Now, another example is, think of Switzerland. This is a country which is in Europe, but they don't have any natural resources. Yet, they have such a high confidence in the economy that banks in other countries bank in Switzerland. Now, that just shows you how powerful perception is, that it can drive a country's entire economy. Therefore, a high level of trust is directly correlated with building strong economies. Now, let's take a look at the profile of some of the businesses which we approached. And in 9 out of every 10 businesses, we found that they were owned by either an individual or family members. Now, that will tell us that in Tanzania, people are only willing to do businesses with people they are related to. Now, breaking this further, we found that only 1 out of every 7 businesses are owned entirely by women. Now, we have to ask ourselves as a society, how willing are we to support and empower women so that they can go out and start their own enterprises? Moving on to youth, only 1 out of every 6 businesses are owned by youth. So this shows that youth don't have the resources or are not entrusted with resources to go out and start their own ventures. So what does this say about our inheritance structure? Seeing as 2/3 of our nation is made up of people who are under the age of 35. So let's look at the components which we used to calculate the level of trust in our business environment. And as you can see, there are 9 different components, but we'll just take a look at a couple of them. So let's take a look at market outlook. And here, we were asking businesses how they feel about the security, the future, and the industry of their business. And we also asked them about their short-term and long-term concerns, as well as the growth plans for their business. Interestingly, one fact from here is 1 out of every 3 businesses say that their profitability had significantly decreased over the past 5 years. Okay, let's take a look at another component, government services. And here we were trying to ask businesses what they think about the procedures, the systems, and the processes, as well as the access to services from the government. And an interesting fact from here is 11 out of every 20 businesses say that they don't feel supported by the government. They feel that they receive significant competition from the government. So these are government agencies which are going out and doing business. Okay, maybe let's look at taxation. Now, in taxation, we asked businesses how they felt about the tax systems, the tax rates, the number of times they pay tax, and so on. And an interesting fact from here is 9 out of every 10 businesses say that they face significant or unfair competition from businesses which do not pay tax. So these are basically squatter businesses. And maybe we can take a look at one final one. Let's look at access to finance. And here we were asking businesses about how they got their capital for their business, how they finance their business, the interest rates which are available for their business. And an interesting fact from here was that 1 out of every 2 businesses have never taken a loan for their business. And we all know that financing is very important for the growth of businesses. So we put all these components together, and we got an overall level of trust of 55. Now, what does this mean? Consequently, the ease of doing business rated Tanzania for the year 2020 and gave it a score of 54.5. We got 55. Now, what can we do to improve the level of trust in our business environment? Now, we did make some recommendations for the government, but you might be thinking, what can I do? What can we do as a society? And we noticed that many of the problems which exist in the business environment actually originate from our households. Now, we will make 2 suggestions in order to improve on 2 main aspects, which we can individually work on. And the first one would be communicating regularly and openly. Half of the owners of the SMEs did not have an education which was beyond secondary school. Now just think about that. A lot of complicated policies come from the government. But we found that many of the challenges which they face are because of lack of information and misinterpretation of information. And this problem emanates from our culture, because in Tanzania, we have a habit of skirting around problems rather than addressing the main problem. Because we don't want to inconvenience other people or to be inconvenienced. But when you think about it, without trust, we cannot have healthy conflict. We cannot set objectives, and we cannot keep each other accountable. So that is why communicating regularly and openly is important. Now, consequently, the businesses which ranked highest in communication were the most well-informed, they were the most compliant, and they were the most willing to engage the government in issues which are important to them. Now, if these businesses came together and were organized, they could influence the change that they want to see. But the problem is, they are in the minority. Now, the second aspect is genuine altruism. So this is selflessness. Now, trust is the essential ingredient in most relationships. And the definition of trust which I like is, trust is choosing to be vulnerable and take risks. Now, can I just get a raise of hands? Has anyone ever heard of the prisoner's dilemma? Okay, so there are a few. But when I first heard of it, I realized that I'd actually experienced it in my own personal life. So I will define it according to how I experienced it. So me and my younger brother, we used to love watching TV, but we were not allowed to watch TV during the weekdays. But we loved our cartoons, so we would watch TV. Now, my dad will come back and he would suspect that we had been watching TV. So what he will do is he would separate us and then he would put us in two different rooms. And then he would interrogate me and then he would tell me, look, I will double your pocket money if you tell me if your younger brother was watching TV. But if I say that my younger brother was not watching TV, I will get the same amount of pocket money. Now, the problem is, if my brother said that I was watching TV, as what happens in typical African households, I would get a beating. And the thing is, my brother was offered the exact same deal. So, as you can see, if we told on each other, we would both get a beating. If we kept quiet, we would get the same amount of pocket money. And if one of us cooperated and one of us snitched, then one of us will gain while the other lost. Now, that is the prisoner's dilemma, because we don't know what the other person is going to tell our dad. Now, in game theory, there's a concept which is called the iterated prisoner's dilemma. And this is when this is done over and over again. And you guessed it, that happened to us. Now, the first time, I told on my brother, and he cooperated, so I got double the pocket money. And then the second time, I felt sorry for him, so I was like, okay, let's cooperate. But the guy snitched on me. And then the next time we cooperated, and then we both tried being smart and we both got a beating. But eventually, we realized that it is better for us if we cooperated and trusted that the other person also has the best intention for us. So we cooperated, and that's how it went. Now, the only problem is our young sister came along, and then she spoiled everything. Now, 1 out of every 2 businesses in the business environment say that they don't feel that the government has the best intention for them. And at the same time, 2 out of every 5 public servants say that they don't believe entrepreneurs are honest in their business dealings. So both parties are not giving each other the benefit of doubt. But we need to build a culture where we wish the best for others. And when we're making a decision, make a decision which will also benefit others and not necessarily have the best outcome for us. Now, I'm not saying that we should lie for each other, just to be clear. But eventually, if we build this culture, it will be better for our society. Because when we meet someone new, we can be assured that they have the best intentions for us. Now, there's a man who's called Lee Kuan Yew. He's Singapore's former prime minister. He's both vilified and revered. But he said that, and he carried Singapore's economy from a third world country to a first world country within a matter of decades. But he said that Singapore depends on the influence of family to maintain order in society, as well as to have a culture of growth, and at the same time, a culture of learning and hard work. And he believed that this influenced the population to be hardworking, and it created economic growth. And I believe that he was onto something when he said that the family unit is the first building block of society. Now, when we think of the two values of communicating regularly and openly, as well as genuine altruism, and we continually practice them in our society, this will eventually emanate onto the society, onto our businesses, and onto the public sector, because the same people come from families. Now, in Tanzania, we have this saying that if someone gives you a lift and you don't have anything to talk about, you hit a pothole, you can just say, this government. You will have enough material for the rest of your journey. And there's a Swahili saying which says that, sasa tumeshiba tuiseme serikali. Now that we are full and we have eaten, let us talk about the government. So next time you meet someone and they're complaining about the business environment, you can ask them, what are you doing about it? What are you going to do about it? And maybe because you've heard this talk, you can have an interesting conversation. We must remember that change starts with us, and the first place that we can start is with our trust. Thank you very much.